I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.
One of the instructors called me and said, "Hey, Roric, I heard you were the Lincoln County tube setting champion when you were in high school. 2 years in a row." And I said, "Well, I had that distinction."
You never lose it, guys.
Yeah,
Well,
Roric comes out of retirement and wins. I love it.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the stream, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation featuring guests who reject the status quo in the world of water and beyond. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarney, a water strategy advisor and investor, doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
And today, as part of season 7 and a special focus on water and agriculture, we are thrilled to be joined by Roric Paulman, who is a Nebraskan third-generational farmer with Paulman Farms, but also the chair of the Nebraska Water Balance Alliance. And a big thank you and shout out to our sponsor, Raymond James, and also our charity partner, Frank Water. So Roric, thanks for joining us. Great to see you. How are you?
Well, great to see you guys. It's a wonderful day in Nebraska. We had a half-inch rain last night, which where we are, that doesn't occur often. So great day for us.
When
That's
it
a great
rains,
way to
you're
start
happy.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So Roric, yeah, delighted to have you on. I think you as you've mentioned, you're the third generation of farmers. Your son, the fourth generation, is currently kind of working on running the farm. But actually, the fifth generation, your 8-year-old grandson, is also pretty knowledgeable, right? And is out there and knows the land as better than anyone. So talk us through kind of I'd love to know the origin story of kind of Paulman Farms and setting up and that kind of, generational farming. It'd be great to get some insight on that to kickstart.
Absolutely. My grandfather made his way through Colorado here, in the 30s. So, we've got some connections. So, and he came at a pretty tough time, but he was part of a lot of the infrastructure projects that existed on the Platte River. And one of them in particular was the Southern Reservoir, which is about a mile from our house. And it's part of a very sophisticated groundwater irrigation system, but ultimately turned into this great hydrologically connected recharge facility for all of the Ogallala aquifers. So he was a part of that project in the 30s. And then my dad came around and in the mid 30s went to school and ended up back on the farm in the mid 50s and started growing corn and basically corn. That was it, and alfalfa. And so we had cattle. We fed cattle. We had hogs. We had chickens. We had bucket calves. We had just a little bit of everything, and this wonderful system that was created as a result of my grandfather's time here and then my dad's investment allowed me to grow up in a system that I grew up setting siphon tubes. And to those that don't know what that means, that's a lot of time in a ditch pushing water over a hill down a road. So, and with a shovel.
Can you repeat that again? What do you call it? Setting siphon tubes.
Yeah.
Is that the name for it? Oh, right.
Yeah. So you diverted. Go ahead.
Yeah. Roric, talk about a siphon tube, and I'll bet that was high tech back in the day. So
it was high tech because the water that came out of the lake came down a canal system that they poured concrete checks, and you put boards in, check the water up so it would run out a higher diversion into a ditch. And you got a call on the river. The ditch rider came and said, "Hey, you get water for 3 days." And you diverted it, and basically you had this ditch, and then you cut holes in the ditch to run water down the corn rows. And we thought, gosh, this is a lot of work. You got to dig them, and then you got to turn around and fill them back up, and it was hard to control. So then you took a piece of pipe. It was U-shaped. Literally U-shaped, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter. And you checked up your ditch with a canvas dam and then you put in enough tubes to regulate the ditch to run the water down the rows of corn. And that U shape evolved into a U shape with an L on the end. And so you used to have old finger benders, and then they called them double bender siphon tubes. So we would start early in the morning at 6 a.m. And be done at 10 at night, but we would change water. Once the rows, we got down to the end, you obviously would move them down to the next set, and so on and so forth. Well, that system was tremendous because a lot of the return flows ended up either in a catch area or returning to the river or recharging the aquifer. So, but we didn't know that. We were simply growing a crop that we were converting into protein for our own consumption or to sell at the grocery store. And we literally delivered the eggs and the milk and everything right out of our own dairy right to the people that were in town, and vice versa. So it was very connected. It was very community, and it wasn't large production, but you ultimately grew your production as the expectation for more livestock. So that siphon tube was quite an innovation, from moving hand pipe and digging ditches to that. And kind of an add-on, they had a little, that's years ago. This is my 39th crop. That was 40 years ago. And actually longer than that, I guess. It'd been in the 60s. So they had a contest here. It's kind of there's a few of them left today, and odd pieces and guys that just don't want to give up. But the diversions are harder to get out of the ditch because of this conversion to center pivots and micro irrigation. But they had a water tank at a farm field day at the university, and I watched this crowd of people, and there's 4 tubes, and you had to set them quickly, as quick as you can, and they're all struggling. They might get one started, and finally they just said after a minute, we had to let somebody else go. And one of the instructors called me and said, "Hey, Roric, I heard you were the Lincoln County tube setting champion when you were in high school, 2 years in a row." And I said, "Well, I had that distinction, I guess." So, well, I said, "What do you think? You give this a hand?" And I said, "Sure." So I walked over there, and I have rather large hands. I'm 6'3", and I blessed my dad and grandfather were pretty capable farmers. So we had plenty of exercise to make sure that we were in shape. But I walked over to those tubes, and just shy of 15 seconds, I had all 4 of them running. so everybody's looking around and like, whoa, what?
Can you imagine the crowd? Kind of, the guys before just couldn't get it done. Along comes Roric, the former champion, effortlessly gets it done, looks around and goes, a little nod to the crowd. You never lose it, guys.
Yeah, well, Roric comes out of retirement and wins. I love it.
Well, you videoed it, and the young people there, though, had no idea. They had no connection to that relationship of the progression that has occurred and is continuing to occur in this technological revolution in terms of understanding that the system of agriculture. We spent a lot of time on the technology side, picking out particular aspects of that system, and irrigation is one of them, obviously, but we neglected or didn't include enough of the whole system, and that's where we are today, is building that and working within that very complex model.
Hey, Roric, it strikes me that you have a balance or a profound understanding from where you came, setting siphon tubes and understanding the hydraulic system, to really looking at advanced tech as a way to improve productivity, the health of the crops you grow, and so on. Do you think there's a little bit of sort of looking back going on right now in the ag sector, in terms of people beginning to get a better understanding of just some of the basics, as opposed to just running head on into tech adoption? Or am I just...
I think it's almost... Let me cover just a little the social side. To me, we are so disconnected. My family grew up, and everybody knew where their eggs came from. Everybody knew where their pork came from. and they knew how the wheat that we grew, was turned into flour. They knew that. And it didn't go through a whole bunch of hands or commercialization, wholesale distribution, and that connection existed all the way through our local and state governments, all the way to the Fed. It was very connected. And today, I ran for state senator 2 rounds ago, and unsuccessfully, I was beaten by 125 votes. But it's probably one of the best opportunities for me to understand how that works. And why is that important is because at the end of the day, that connection from the soil all the way through to the gavel that happens at our governor or legislative level, or at the USDA, or in the White House, that disconnect is significant. And figuring out. So why the leap to technology? Why embrace it? Is multiples of reasons, and one very simple one is finding people, that same understanding, the willingness to work, a little bit of that sweat, a little bit of that. When you set that siphon tube, that was an enjoyable day with the mosquitoes and 110-degree heat, and and to where we've landed today. So that progression has really changed and helped me. So the data. Without data, people won't listen to you. Without your story, which is what we're working at today, but also the data points and the reliability of those data points and data sources.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I will confess, I grew up in a city, so I didn't know where food came from. I just really did. There was no visceral connection to food production and what that looks like, and understanding the complexities of it. So that social disconnect, I'd say is alive and well to a very large degree, which is not healthy from a public policy perspective, certainly.
Well, take irrigation. The bulk of that system has been in the alluvium, or the next to a river or a stream flow or a lake. It's because that hydrologically connected relationship of a stream and the aquifer. I didn't believe it when they came to me and they said, that transmissivity and your your what? I can't even spell those words. and you're asking me as a producer, that we're poking straws in the ground. That's the simplest place to go, is people don't understand. I said, think about your soda or your chocolate shake that you're so fond of, and that straw that you dip in. You start at the top, and as it goes down, you keep sliding that straw down. And that's literally what occurs in either an abundant supply or a very restricted supply, is you continue to move that straw. And there, it's not that we don't care. It's that we too did not understand how that system how it acted
Sure.
together. We didn't know. Again, data points. How do we understand that?
I really like that. I hate to say point about data points, but if you're really going to influence people, it strikes me that it's got to be this sort of very visceral social narrative around, this is where food comes from, and this is how you grow it, and this is how you distribute it, coupled with the data to make a compelling case for better use of resources, more rational use of resources. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but ensuring that American agriculture thrives going forward, and it's just so critical in the conversation.
Well, in the world wars, we didn't starve. The European Union did.
Right.
Europe did, and that's a whole different piece. And one of the companies that I work with very closely came out of Spain, and it was part of a relationship with the European Union with their climate smart initiative, and we brought a company called Biome Makers here with a bee crop report. So we have always soil tested, and the soil test was literally about nutrition, was about the agronomic effects of commercial fertilizer and soil organic matter on the crop that you're going to grow. And what this relationship started to show was, whoa, there's a lot of other things. There's carbon, there's all kinds of interfaces with the microbial fungal relationships, and how do you go down those paths? Well, I wear those hats, but I don't know what those are. I'm not a scientist. I rely on a trusted group of stakeholders to help inform and support our decisions on our farm. So the trust factor amongst all of those things, whether it's a regulatory person, whether that's a salesman, whether that, no matter a sensor provider, all of those people, you had to work through a process. And ultimately, I always told them, I said, you're trying to spend my money, and when you characterize that, that it has to have an ROI, and informally, for a long time, that ROI was the focus. All your decisions were based around that, and the stewardship and the conservation of resources were in there, but they were somewhere back in the epilogue. And so the part that you didn't, that ultimately you may read about, but I call it postmortem in agriculture, is once we got to the yield monitor, the report card about all of the activities and all the data and all the things that we've done to make things better and safer and a better crop. But why did we have to wait so long to understand that? Irrigation was a good example. We continually over irrigated because guess what? Two hardest decisions an irrigator makes: when to start and when to stop. Period. There's no in between. Here in western Nebraska, when it gets the 1st of August, that ET rates in excess of 35 to a half an inch a day. That's all we can pump, and so you're relying on the soil or that checkbook method to sustain you through till the next rain event or precip event. So technology wasn't helping us there. We didn't even have a good forecast. You could turn on the news at night and get a presumptive analysis of what maybe or could occur, but it was regional. It had this idea of the variability at the field level on 130 acres, which is a typical 1,300 foot center pivot. That kind of resolution, as I would allude to it, it didn't occur. It didn't exist. And so when you ask these questions about these data points, no one could get there. And certainly they were all in silos of their own. Well, then here comes the venture capital world. Holy smokes, the disruptors over the last 5 years. There's been billions of dollars poured into this world, and water was one, obviously, but soil health and all these things that you're hearing today, regenerative ag and sustainability, and I love all those words, but we actually are in our operation at Paulman Farms. And what I teach to my grandson and what I hope to mentor my son with is this idea of we're in a state of continuous improvement. That we don't do it. The historical piece is where we came from. That's okay. But in terms of where we're going, how do we change your influence and help support our decisions going forward?
And
that was a lot. That was a lot.
No, this is great. And I love your comment about trust, by the way. I spoke to a CEO of an ag tech company. It was a precision irrigation. And I asked him, as an investor, what's your sales cycle? He said the speed of trust. Yeah. And that was just so spot on and really just changed my thinking dramatically. So it was great to hear you say that. How do you find technologies? Do people come to you? What do you do in terms of outreach and so on? And one thing that impressed me when we were chatting is that you really do have an international view. I mean, you're not just shopping around in Nebraska or even the US. You essentially have your hands everywhere. So what does that process look like in terms of bringing tech to the farm, and how do you vet it and throw out the bad ones?
Well, I want to start with the adoption bell curve. Is one of the things that really just absolutely floored me when we first started early on was soil moisture probes, and everybody had an idea about a soil moisture probe, and they're going to, again, we want to put 10 of them out in the field, but they're all $1,300 a piece. And I'm going, gosh, guys, there's no way. There's no way we're going to do this. So I said, but here, let's do this. I will help. Let's put them all out there and let's see what I'll give you all the data. I'll share it with you. And that's where my relationship launched. I was then with Valmont and their center pivot piece, and I have been a part of their research and development for years. And the same way with John Deere Water and that whole. I've signed a lot of NDAs in my life around technologies, and it's important that I took it upon myself, not only on my own farm, but as legislation occurred in Nebraska, and also to some extent across the U.S. and in Washington, D.C., there's few farmer voices. There's association voices. There's corn boards, and there's soybean boards, and there's the cattlemen and all of that. But under that whole piece, there was rarely a time where just a single voice walked into an office and you just sat down and chatted. And they're asking the same questions. What kind of tech should we invest in so that we can get the data points? One of them was groundwater withdrawals. So I made the mistake early on. The NRDs were putting on mechanical flow meters. But you read them in the spring and you read them in the fall, and you got to the end and it said, oh, by the way, you only get 12, but you use 14. And we're going to take that 2 inches away from you in next year's allocation. Well, that'd have been nice to know during the season. That would have been nice to know on that. Remember when I talked about those 2 toughest decisions, when to start and when to stop? Would that not have been kind of an important relationship to have? Well, I was quickly associated with I hated meters. Didn't need them. Didn't want them. And so I said, whoa. I want the data. How we collect it and the integrity of that data is up for discussion. But without it, in the absence of collecting that through a sensor or through a data acquisition port, we know nothing. We are literally operating on our own cognitive what we've learned through my grandfather and my father. That still exists in a big way today, because then that bell curve comes into play. That 10% of us that are willing to have death by 1,000 cuts, to the 50 or 60% that standing back looking over the fence going, that guy's doing okay, I might try a little of that. But they're not going to dip their toe in the water, because most of these devices or tools or venture capital ideas, tech, had no return. They is a great idea, but without adoption, the innovation occurred at light speed, but adoption is so waned and so far behind. But until we started talking about regenerative ag and soil health and carbon footprints, no one would put anything behind it or support that relationship. So we have a whole building full of junk of stuff that the probe that we put out there, and then the company goes away. And it's funny today, it's come full circle. Probes, we made a mistake with probes. We simply should have showed the trend. We should have showed, here's where you are. Here's where you're going. You're getting wetter or you're getting drier. But no, we had all these squiggly lines and all these different colors, and we tried to give a gas gauge, and we tried to, and you're looking out across that field, from that boots on the ground and butt in the seat is how we grow crops, or how we've grown crops historically, generationally. And what we pass on is still that visualization, and that hands on the dirt are still important. They're a key aspect to it.
I think it's, so interesting. First of all, I love your reaction when you talk about the introduction of venture capital based technology, and the mention of VC was like, holy smoke. But I think
this will be great.
But as you mentioned there, you've been obviously you've seen the cycles of new innovations come in and then perhaps not get used, and you've got a barn full of these widgets that you've adopted that are no longer using, and it must be quite interesting when companies are trying to pitch you their new solutions, and you can kind of say, I don't know if you know this, but 15 years ago we had something similar, and it didn't, so. But yeah, I mean, when we started the conversation, you mentioned there's been a kind of a few aha moments in 40 years of farming, and to kind of bring it back on soil health, there was a couple quite recently, right, in terms of the data that you're generating. So, can you talk to us kind of a bit more about like what those aha moments were and why?
So nutrient. The nutrient system of growing a crop is really important, but it was disconnected. The nutrients are on one side of the ledger, water was on the other. And the idea of how soil tests historically, we have always soil tested. We have not ever not done it. And I was surprised, even through the local co-ops and big time providers, of how little of that goes on, and how that trusted advisor or that trusted source of data was informing you about making those decisions. They're hundreds of dollars an acre. They're millions of dollars on our farm. My son runs an 8,000 acre, 80% groundwater supplement. Supplements the rain because we don't irrigate 100% of ET. We can't. We don't have the water. We don't have the economic return to provide 100% of the water to the crop. It doesn't make any sense. It won't work. It's hard on the resources as well as any type of economic return. So understanding that aha moment was how do just like the hydrologically connected and the transmissivity piece of water is those two are we talk about water infiltration rates, and we talk about water holding capacities, but when we talk about soil organic matter and improving it over time, and then that in turn increases your water holding capacity, but it doesn't inflict a lot of changes in your infiltration rates. So I didn't know any of that. I'm not a scientist, and so the fact that we knew so little about this. So I started asking questions, and guess where I went? Right to the university, right to USDA ARs. And I just got in the middle of them. I go, what are you spending millions of dollars on? What? And of course they're going, gosh, we want our research to be relevant. And I'm going, whoa, really? So who are you talking about being relevant about? Because so pretty soon I start being on advisory boards, and I'm on a lot of them, and I'm willing to share that because I look at it and I go, that makes no sense. Well, and that disconnect again, as I said earlier, it really struck me that no one was taking the time to connect the dots, and they were, but they were in their own space, in their own silos. And so I started asking the question, how can we connect local weather to the flow of the well, to the ET of the actual plant, and understanding that actual delivery, and then looking at the soil moisture. Well, that we can give you some satellite imagery. Okay, well that's fine, but I didn't know to ask how often were the flights, what's the resolution, and really what it's telling me. And most guys don't. And oh, by the way, it's only $5 an acre. Well, 5 times 6,000, do the math. That's $30,000
of your money.
Yeah, again,
spending your money.
Spend my money.
That's another great quote.
Yeah.
You've got to love that business model, so haven't you? Only a few dollars per acre. Well, come on, guys. Look how many acres I have. Like, let's get to the total number here.
Well, it doesn't matter whether it's a producer with 500 acres or 50,000. The process that you go through of this understanding and the delivery of that data. And at first, we were satisfied, to your desktop. And I started out with a company called AgSense, and Terry Shields came to my office, And it was this pivot telemetry that was revolutionary. You put a box out on the end of the pivot, it give you a georeference, you could forward reverse, it would text you when it shut off or it was stuck or run out of power. Whoa, this is cool. Get it here. So he rolled into my office and he sat down and I said, start your watch. And he goes, what? I said, start your watch. And I said, do you have a watch? Yeah. And so he started his watch and I said, go through your website and get me to an actionable item. And he did. And I said, stop. And he goes, and I go, how long was that? He said, just shy of 90 seconds. I go, take that times 50. Well, why? I said, just please, just humor me here for just a second. So he did the math and I said, I'll be darned. Almost 80 minutes for me to look at 50 pivots. And he go, oh, well, that's the 50? Is you have 50 machines? I go, yes. And it took you 1.5 minutes. And I said, we need something else. So red, green, yellow, we need that aha moment is guy. So I still preach that today. They still use that at Valley and at AgSense about, you have to get this down to milliseconds. And that was on our website. And then it came to an iPad. And today it's on our phones and it's in text alerts. And that aha moment exists in a lot of ways today, Tom. It comes from your tractor. It comes from your sprayer. It comes from your planter.
Wow.
We are applying microbiologists, natural fertilizer right to the seed in real time. We're beta testing some equipment on our planter. It's incredible. And we want to do that too, but it has to have an ROI. That aha moment, no matter what the sensor is, what the data is, people, we have to tie that together. We have to recognize the system, and you can't operate in isolation. You just can't do it. So we have another project that we recently deployed. It's a partnership with Arable and their weather station suite, which calculates ET, wind, anemometer. It has a rain gauge that doesn't have mechanical parts. It uses ultrasonic. And we recently connected it to a pressure transducer on the pivot. Instead of a static mounting of the weather station, it's going to travel in the circle on the center pivot and give us a calculation. It also has a multispectral camera. And Google partnered with that, looking at it on a 7-year commitment to look at how, what is this whole relationship of these tools or these silos into a inform and support irrigation decisions or cropping decisions, agronomic decisions, and building that level of trust. So when you ask how have I done that, I've always had a saying. I made this kind of a play. Like, we're agnostic. Be clear about that. Is we don't care what color or whose paint it is when it comes on here in terms of, but we have a field and support field days, and then that traveled globally. I actually farmed in South Africa near Kimberley and Hopetown. I also had farming interest in Belize, and I also worked very closely with a close friend in the state of Cordoba in Argentina with 6 of the largest farmers who I still host annually here at the farm for a work day. And I was actually headed there during COVID, but I had to change my plans to go around. But we have always treated it as an exchange. So those aha moments are occurring all over the globe. And if we can do something that makes our willingness to understand what I told you was the epilogue, was that conservation and stewardship was always a part of the conversation, but it was at the back of the book. And today, those decisions, that the prioritization of that conservation stewardship of all resources, but water, of course, is what we're talking about here today. It's now a priority, because here's why. It's multi-million-dollar investments on our farm for a piece of equipment. That tractor is no longer $50,000. It's $800,000. That planter is $700,000. That combine and 2 heads is $1 million. And yes, we make it work because it's scale and it's efficiencies and it's data. But that aha moment is just that, is that system that continues to incur, and you try to get in with your bit of inflection in terms of what my best, I've got a great idea for you. I'm certain you do, but how are you going to fit in this? And my willingness to ask that question, but also accommodate that willingness to share and put their piece into it and see how it fits. But we started a program as a result of my understanding and our willingness to share a farm, which we'll continue to do into the future. We started a program called TAPS, Testing Ag Performance Solution. And it's actually a competition, but and you can Google it, taps.unl.edu. But what we did is we took just that. We made it a platform to test all these technologies and being most efficient in water utilization and nutrient management, and then of course most profitable, got you a cash prize. And it blew up. I mean, I won it the first year, and then I stepped aside because I was just helping, and my son finished fourth out of, I don't know how many there was at the time, but we're in their 8th year and we're building this peer network. And that is crucial to expanding that voice across what's important to maintain our food supply, maintain our resource management, and this whole quality conversation now about the quality of our water and its degradation on the drinking side. So aha moments, I can share probably multiple hours, but that's really one of them.
So Roric, I hope that one day I am with you when someone comes to sell you something, because I would pay to hear that conversation. You are priceless. Roric, thanks. This is invaluable insights, and I just really love the blend of, you know, the social piece, the history, and how you're thinking about tech and being really critical of it.
I think, yeah, I mean, from the early days, from siphon tubes, 40 years later, to kind of real-time data, and actually, as you mentioned, insights on water getting into the seed. I mean, that's an amazing 4 decades of innovation, right? So yeah, really appreciate your time, Roric. You know, good luck to your son and grandson on the farm. It'll be amazing to maybe in a few seasons' time, we'll maybe bring those guys on to hear about other generations of Paulman and how they're getting on as well. But yeah, really appreciate your time.
I think we need to get together for a steak dinner, Roric. What do you say?
I am in. I want to share one little thing. You know, my wife is a longtime educator, 44 years, and just recently retired. And Brant travels with me. He's usually with me today, but he had wrestling camp. But I put him in that $500,000 tractor during harvest, running a grain cart, and I was in the combine. And he's 8 years old. And I took a video, and you know, I mean, flawless, just because all the tech's there, you know, auto track, and it can drive, and you know, you see all of this and cameras and all this stuff going on, and I went home and I'm sharing with my wife Deb, Grandma, about how Brant ran that tractor, and holy smokes, was she mad. You allowed an 8-year-old child to operate a tractor of this magnitude, and I said, you know, how we share and how we inform and support those young men and women's abilities to understand what's going on is really, really important. And Tom, if I have probably my biggest aha moment is how do we do that through our families, through our relationships, our communities, and that piece right there is the willingness to take the time to do that, but also to listen. I have to listen, and if I don't listen, I won't be able to meet people where they are and be able to articulate any type of a resolution. So I have to listen.
That is a great, optimistic, positive view. And, you know, when we started this podcast together pre-pandemic and launched it during the pandemic, Roric, that was the core of how we wanted to shape it. It was that you articulated that really well. So a million thanks. I'll get on your calendar for a steak dinner and we'll drag this guy from the UK. How's that?
I'm
Sound
in.
good?
Today
All right.
sounds good. Amazing. Thank you, Roric.
Thank
Be
you.
well.